So we got Mike Woodcock again today with Absolute Sound up in Chatham, Ontario, Canada. And I'm Walt Stagner from TLP Audio. And Mike said that he wanted to chat a little bit about some audio basics, and then we'll move in from there, talking about some of the things that Angela-Gilbert Yeung does that make audio a little bit more interesting and a little bit more different. So take it away, Mike, and start wherever you like.
Well, I guess we'll start with people now with turntable boom and music. They're all into really good music.
They want to get back, and they want to get back to vinyl. I mean, vinyl is having a big resurgence right now.
Absolutely. And digital's an easy thing to get streaming now. It's in every product that's out there. And I just wanted people to know, why would I buy a left and right stereo amplifier, just a regular amplifier like they had in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and so on, and 80s, 90s? And why not surround sound, or, just get a sound bar and that'll do the trick, or just get a Sonos speaker and that'll do the trick? And the key to that is making sure that your money goes into a spot where you're moving the needle. You really get something in bigger performance. If it's just a little better, what's the point of it all?
Right, that's right. That's
truly better. The convolution of many untrained stores and people that just aren't vastly experienced in this, it's hard to weed through the oceans of thousands of products and make heads of what the heck all this stuff is.
Well,
why do we buy this one? Why don't I buy that one?
And I want to clarify something too. I mean, you actually have a brick and mortar store there, and you actually have a variety of audio components that people can buy. So you can sell basically any of those things.
Yeah, I'm in a small market, Chatham, Ontario, which is a 45,000 person town. I've been open since 1985.
Okay.
And since 1978, I ran two other stores and managed another one in town, which was a really good high-end hi-fi shop. And they closed, partner breakup, and I opened that pretty much a couple months after. So I have products in here from $250 a pair for speakers to $40,000 a pair. I have amplifiers in here from $269 for my basic Yamaha AM/FM amplifier, 80 watts a channel, to $40,000, and just an integrated amp with nothing in it. And that's quite a broad scope. And the philosophy in my store was very simple. My job is to protect the customers, not just move boxes and make money, keep the overhead low, do my thing. Everybody that knows me understands that I'm here and I love what I do, and I'm very passionate about it. But today we want to make a video so that the common person that sees this can go, hey, I got a pathway. I got an idea that I can probably put my money in there, and not a lot, and make good ends of it. Historically in hi-fi, you'd have all these amplifiers and surround receivers. That's your basic. Say you go from $299 to $1,000. Anywhere in there, you're buying one product. That's an amplifier. It's going to play a pair of speakers. And what's the difference between all of them? And then to move from that point to real hi-fi is usually thousands. So if you're talking about all the real good hi-fi brands, you're usually looking at $1,500 for a hi-fi piece to $50,000. And boy, oh boy, that'd be confusing if you just jumped in. It'd be absurd. That's quite
a broad scope. So there has to be a number of reasons for how you get from $500 to $50,000. So
usually, and the way that happens, Walter, usually is experience. So you've had a $1,500 one, then you've bought yourself a $2,000 or $3,000 amplifier.
That's right.
And you've looked at and got really good at it, but you've heard some of the $10,000 ones, and maybe you'll try that. And each of those move the needle a little tiny bit. And in my experience, when you spend an exorbitant amount of money, and I'm talking over $5,000 versus $1,000, you really only move the needle a couple of points in music. You're really not making a night and day shift because of the production line methods and the costs associated with making things that are by the hand. It can slow down too much because all of them, nobody truly makes anything by hand. Even the companies that are saying they're very small get help. So I make with you and I both support and sell Gilbert Angela-Yeung stuff, which is, gosh, it's like taking a brilliant artistic mind that makes things like the 20s or 30s. No circuit boards, bars, everything point to point, perfectly made. Well, that gets us to $3,000 Canadian starting, or 2,000 US and up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do we do with all the people that don't know? And I posed that to Gilbert. I said, what do we do with someone who can't afford that? And let's face it, that's a lot of money for people. And I said, it took about 8 weeks. And she thought about it. He thought about it, went through it, and said, I can make funkies. And you've seen funkies on her. Those are basically old amplifiers like this that Angela-Gilbert would strip everything out inside. And she said, I have 35 years of parts, and I would make you an amplifier inside with beautiful high-end hi-fi parts that I can't get more of. I have 7 of this, 10 of that, 12 of this.
Yeah. So why don't you show us what you have there, because we can kind of see it.
So those funky pieces were 1,500 through $3,000, so they were still a fair amount.
Yeah.
So I went down to Angela's and I gave her the Yamaha piece. I carry Yamaha because it's been around, still Japanese. In fact, the Yamaha Motor Company, I think, is 1959. The logo that's on Yamaha Motors is actually a music logo. It's 3 tuning forks.
Yeah.
So the bones of what they do, the basics are very good. So this is a Yamaha 801 integrated amplifier. Sells for $1,299 Canadian. And I have the exact same thing across the floor here. That's the beginning one, called a 301. This is an 801. There's a 301. The 301 is only $499 retail. And it's a fabulous build of piece of electronics. And I gave it to Gilbert, Angela, and she looked at it and said inside of it, well, you basically got inside this amplifier all the bare bones of what makes a good hi-fi piece. You can see that okay, Walt?
Yes, yes.
So inside this, you have a left and a right, sort of like a dual mono setup. The heat sinks have outputs on them. They get push speakers.
Yep.
They come on the transformer from the power. They have a primary and a secondary winding. The secondary winding would give us voltage for, like, say I needed 9 volts for lights or my switchings. And then I need, say, 30 or 40 volts for all my power amplifier to work. So it's really that simple. That's all a transformer does. And then inside of this, these two are output transistors that are sitting on the heatsink. So there's a signal that comes in on the jacks, hits my boards in here that allow the signal to be processed and gained or moved up to be put output to the speakers. So those are the 2 stages inside. There's a line stage and an output stage. Now, why wouldn't I buy a surround receiver instead of this? Well, because a surround receiver will have other boards that are in here, all contacted to these left and right jacks that are on the back. They come in pretty clean. The more I mess with them and the more parts I have, the worse I can get. Also, with all surround receivers, you'll have processing in them. So you've taken your music, if it's analog, so it's a nice little sine wave we can hear, like our ears, an analog device, and it recognizes everything. In comes this music, and we've made it ripple or distort somewhat, and we've touched it too many times, and we've taken away its dynamic ability to be loud and quiet, and we've taken its smoothness and linearity on when we look at it on a scope or measure it, and it doesn't sound as good. We want sound good, so we need less parts. And then a surround receiver, because we process on the front where it says hall, club, live, theater, stereo, whatever we touch for the buttons, the more features we add means it's got to go through a processing chip that takes all the music. No matter what work I did here, I get to go through a tiny little chip. Now there's a chip in here, but similar to this, and it's quite small.
Well, and that's just on the input stage, and
that's right.
And the input stage changes it before it even gets to the output stage, so you can hear it.
We poured all kinds of dirt in our music.
Right.
No matter how we try to clean it after that, we can't do it.
Right.
So that's why you buy an amplifier like in the 80s or 90s that was around, that was 2-channel, or the 70s or 60s, and it's simpler. The best amount of parts is accomplish a circuit is usually less parts. The best connection is no connection. the least amount of contact points. So Yami does this, and Gilbert looked at it and he said, you know what, this is a good basic 2-channel amplifier layout. It's a massive company, economies of scale really work for these guys, and at $499 you get a hell of an amplifier. But you're limited to it sounding like a standard stereo, like all the other stereos, but it's very good and it'll last a long time. It's built so that it's rugged, it's got a longer factory warranty, all that stuff. So he liked all that. Inside this, underneath this board, there are 2 capacitors, big silver ones. And capacitors store some energy that feed that signal output that are being resisted or impeded by your speakers. You heard of impedance? In audio, stuff doesn't want to move. We have to use electrical energy to move it. Well, the electrical energy here that fills in quick, because when you have between 20 milliseconds and 500 millisecond tone bursts on music, and it's always moving fast and piercing, you need to have capacitance energy or energy to fill in the gaps when all the parts are fighting each other, being resisted, for lack of a better word. There's a better way to explain that circuit for a general person. It lets them understand what the capacitors are doing. So Angela-Gilbert said, you know what I'll do is I'll go ahead in here and because this is made well, like Angela added 6 times the original capacitance. You'll see under here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 huge 10,000 microfarad capacitors at 63 volts, which is the voltage rail that we start with right here. So we've added 6 times the original energy in support of music. If there's any pitfalls, well, it's being resisted, and we've also smoothed out the signal a little bit by doing that. There's also, you'll see flash capacitors in here, quick dumping capacitors. So you've got 2 different types of capacitor in here that help all of this that's being resisted, and different speeds. In other words, slew rates or bloats or how they fill in the music, they'll act a little bit differently, because music has different, there's different requirements. Do you want it to sound fast? Do you want it to have sound slow? So ideally, there's no amount of energy we could put in here that wouldn't help, because it would. You'll see that it's all in silicone here, and this silicone is a method with all of these bars and 14-2 rod, no circuit board. So this is very quick energy to the board. The capacitors here, the way these are wired with this gauge and those thicknesses, will get energy out much, much faster than through a circuit board. A circuit board's like a piece of tinfoil, a piece of paper. Only it's, aluminum foil.
Yep.
So you'd have even thinner than aluminum foil, and it'd be made out of copper or some copper and filler. And underneath that would be their fiberglass, and the top would be their fiberglass, and they'd sealed it all off. And we all know if you glue all that, the electrons are trying to migrate on the surface like pulse. They're not like a light where they just turn on, they're moving. So audio is always moving, so it needs to be free to flow. So in dielectric, the best dielectric on the surface of some piece of metal is air. But we have circuit boards. They're a necessary evil in the production method. In Angela-Gilbert stuff, it's all handmade. There are very few to no circuit boards, or just tiny sections of something that's going to help us get where we need to go. But no circuit boards of any kind, no plugins either. So plugins are something when you're fast assembling, you'll see wire conduits with little parts in there, and you'll see little snap-ins. That allows you to service the parts, and it allows you to manufacture quickly. But a part, when it goes on there, what's the part do? Well, let's go. And the collar of the part with the wire, let's go. There's my clamp to the wire. So each of those things are bad singers in the choir. So is the white metal pin that's on the board. But anyway, it shows you they have to manufacture. So we're going to try and take something that sounds between the circuit boards and the plugins and the lack of energy and capacitance. But this Yamaha is built extremely well for its money. Offer you sound that sounds like an electrical stereo. If you want it to sound like music, you've got to flow better and have tons of energy. Then it changes it from sounding like a normal stereo system in a store to a true piece of hi-fi that you don't get tired of, and it's musically engaging, beautiful, and you can hear it. So I have this modification that we do here is $300 total. So if I've got a $499 amplifier and I add all this to it, I'm now $499, $800. Now we're not at, where a name integrated will be at starting at $2,900 or $6,000. We're not where any of the other hi-fi lines, that are out there, and there's thousands of them. and they're all way more money than this.
Well, but on the other hand, if somebody says, okay, that's fine, but I'm not ready for that, you're happy to sell them the stock unit if that's what they want, and they could always do the upgrade later.
Yeah, exactly. So what I try to do is show them the difference between a surround sound receiver and its pitfalls and mud parts versus a regular basic good layout that has potential to be improved upon.
Right.
And I have this made with and without. So if you see one of these little badges on here, that's one of the ones Gilbert modified.
Okay.
And without is just a standard 301. So if I go 301 and 301 modified, I will give people all the time. I just take them both home for the weekend and play them both. In every case, 100% so far, they hand me back the other one and say, it works, but compared to the one that's modified, it sounds broken.
Yeah. Yeah.
It moves the needle like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said to Angela-Gilbert, I said, well, why can't Yamaha do that? And he said, Mike, to get people to go in here and hand solder that, he said, you got to sit over 40 kids in a line that's making thousands of them, slow them down. They got to do great solder joints by hand and put them right in there. And he said, if they build it in here, the capacitors are the most expensive part. He said, your pricing, to build something for a price point doesn't work anymore. And your line just slowed to a grinding halt. He said, and when they add capacitors and they do it in the fast method and they're connecting it through circuit boards and they're not doing it with fast rails and they're not doing it with extra support, they only move the needle a little bit. So they say to you, well, why put all those capacitors in it? I'm not changing it enough for the amount of money that I have to change this price. And he said, normally they'd be right. But he says, as a gift to hi-fi, what we do is we'll give you something that makes it unbelievably, exponentially better. And I said, we do that for $300. And I said, when you do that, that's not about making money. I said, what do you make? 50 bucks, 80 bucks for your labor, or, sell some parts. He goes, yeah. And I said, well, why would you do something like that? He says, to make people smile. And it also allows my babies to jump into a real world of hi-fi or a beginning customer. And then later they can trade that, get all their money back for this, and then buy the $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 pieces they aspire to, each time trying it along the way. That's the right method to get your hi-fi, and not just walk into a store and buy something and have spent. I would think most people, by the time they buy a $1,000 amp, $500 pair of speakers, streamer, $500-600, then you're already at $2,000. You got to buy some wire, you got to do some other things. All that is getting costly. You're getting to $3,000 or $4,000. This allows you to get a start, and all you need on here is a good 75 cent a foot wire.
Right.
Put it on. Get things started. Jacks that aren't the little, 50 centers with the red whites. Just basic stuff.
So the bottom line, really, for those of us who happen to be dealers for the Angela-Gilbert Yeung products, is that these kinds of things are available to all of us, so that we can share this with any of our customers who might be interested in such things, right? I mean, so
I agree totally with what you're saying, and it's right. What you're saying is it's like a stepping stone.
Right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
So they can taste what it is to have 130 octane gas and a little better engine as opposed to an 80 octane gas, and they drive around and go, instead of just throwing money, and they didn't know they didn't get the 80, they didn't get any better engine or gas.
That's right.
They just got more features on the front, and they got more bells and whistles and a fancy remote, and none of that makes this thing sound, work any better.
Yeah.
You want it to be beautiful, you have to do something about it. But stores have to take the time to slow down and find out what's actually going on if they're going to be of value to the customer and help them build. And for 43 years, I looked for someone just like Angela-Gilbert, and I didn't think they existed. And oddly enough, right in my backyard, an hour and a half away in trees, this genius artist, beautiful mind, beautiful set of hands, does these things. And I would give Angela the pulse of what people want, because it's very simple. Give me something I can afford.
Right. That's right.
Can I start this hi-fi world? They'll come in. I have people come in and they'll see my store, and I mean, you can spend $80,000 or $100,000 on a stereo. And if you do that, it's shocking when you come in that even exists for most people. 95%, not 99% of people would walk in and go, 10 grand for an amp. My God, that's a lot of money. And I said, well, I have to afford it here.
Well, and not to mention the fact that you're in this relatively small town called Chatham, okay?
Yeah.
It's not like you're in Chicago or Toronto or New York City. So these, you have your own local following, as do I, doing the best I can, being an internet store. You know, I have my own customers that contact us when they're interested in my opinion about what they should do with their system the next time. You know,
that's right. So, and you've got a lot of experience, and common sense should lead the way.
Yeah.
And when you're helping people, I had a young fella come in my store that had bought an Angela Funky Peach, which is one that she found on the road, got the inside and do with the hi-fi parts. And it's is
that the one that was just posted on the internet a few days ago? That was recently
that
delivered.
Was they all everybody sits at bated breath waiting on those things now. At the beginning, we never knew if we'd sell any of them, but yes, it's similar. It's exactly the same as that, but there's a very tall kid named Aaron, and we started him in hi-fi when we got him started. And he turned to me and he said, "You know something, Mike?" He said, "If people, the broad band of people, walk through everything inside what you build and how you build it, and they knew what you did, you'd have 1,000 people outside your door every morning." I said, "Yes," but I said, Angela-Gilbert is one set of hands, so we can only she can only build so much, one at a time. And I said, whoever gets in that door is kind of blessed. You're gonna have something that you can never ever get at a tenth of what you normally would have to spend to get anywhere even near close to under half the performance. That's how bad it is. I get any line, don't care what the name brand is. The expenses are buildings, people, travel, worldwide marketing budgets, on and on and on. It does not stop. And the quickness of manufacturing is plug it in, get it here on boards, get it here in boxes, snap it off, put it together as best we can. And some companies become very good at it, but outside of the large corporations, you're not going to beat them. The middle guys kind of try to do this, which is economies of scale for a low price point. The expensive hi-fi guys try to do some of this philosophy with some of Gilbert's philosophy, and everyone has to fail in between because the costs are too much. And ultimately, if you're making these mass production things that are going to dirty up the sound, you've already failed them. In other words, how many bad singers in the choir does it take to wreck it? Well, if there's 10 instead of 100, does it really matter? You're only going to move the needle so far, and you really can't change sound.
Right.
Because it's a moving target, and every connection is on the move, everything you measure applies but doesn't really apply.
Yeah.
Because it's variable.
So
it's not a light that we're turning on. There's a light switch. It's on and off. That's it. All it needs is any functional contact.
Yeah. So the Zoom clock is counting down here. So we probably ought to end this meeting before we cut you off suddenly. But I think this will be a nice springboard for us to continue a discussion with some of this stuff on the next video. So once again, I want to thank you for your time.
Welcome.
And all the effort to get this little demo set up for us. And
show and tell. All we want people to do is like our video, get out there, have a look at it, ask us questions. That's a lot to take in what we went over. I touched on a lot of bases that go very deep, but feel free to ask us questions.
Oh, well, I'm sure that when we post this, we'll get more questions, and perhaps that we can take some of those questions and maybe answer some of those in the next video. So
help people to enjoy your hi-fi more. That's what it's all about.
Just thanks for your time, and we'll catch you on the next video.